Hello, my name is Gianna. My mother gave birth to me at the age of 20, and my biological father was never involved. He never wanted children, she told me, and because they had only been dating for a few months when she became pregnant, she offered him the option to leave, which he did. She stated that because of the bitterness of their breakup, she had chosen not to demand child support from him, and he had also refused to pay. Never talking again was convenient for both of them. She was fortunate to have my grandparents' unwavering support and encouragement, which enabled her to finish her schooling and secure employment. She dated a couple of men while I was younger, and when I was about 8 years old, she began dating Robert, a coworker. Before getting married, they dated for over 3 years. Although we weren't very close, Robert and I got along well enough to put up with each other being in the house. When my mom became pregnant 4 years after they were married, everyone was overjoyed, including me. In retrospect, I probably should have known what was going to happen, but I was too preoccupied with the idea that my mother would always support me. I hoped she wouldn't leave me now, especially because she had endured a lot of challenges raising me by herself. She obviously distanced herself from me after she married Robert, and we began to drift apart. But I thought it was only a phase and that things would improve. During her pregnancy, I did my best to be encouraging, but she appeared to get angrier every time I was there. To avoid disturbing her, I made the decision to become scarce, but it seems I wasn't inconspicuous enough. She and Robert sat me down for a serious conversation 6 months after she gave birth to twins. They informed me that they couldn't keep me in the house since they had 2 children to look after. They couldn't legally throw me out without getting in trouble because I was still a juvenile, having just turned 16. By highlighting the financial burden of providing for a big family on their meager income, they attempted to persuade me to leave. But since we had been living comfortably up until that point, I honestly didn't think it was difficult to maintain 2 adults, 1 teenager, and 2 kids on the salaries of 2 web engineers. They clearly only wanted me gone. I genuinely didn't want to leave, so even at that point, I attempted to offer solutions. If money was a problem, I offered to get a job. But my mother said she wanted to save money and resources for the children, who deserved it more. She stated that they deserved to stay with them more than I did, not that they needed to. That was all it took for me to decide that I had to leave because it was obvious that no one wanted me. They knew I had enough dignity to understand I was unwanted, so they had only nudged me in the right direction. After I left, without even telling me where I should go, their strategy was successful. Since they hadn't technically evicted me, it wasn't legally an eviction. But I would still consider it to be the same. I felt like I had no other choice. After they had forced me into a difficult situation, I went straight to my grandparents' house. They wanted to be there for the twins, so even though they were upset about what my mother had done, they didn't cut her off. At 16, I obtained part-time work because I could no longer financially rely on my grandparents due to their advanced age. When my mom and Robert visited my grandparents with the kids, would see them every now and then, but they seldom inquired about me. They tended to be very formal, as if they didn't miss me at all. Even when they did see me, they actually appeared to be happy without my presence. I was saddened by my mother's apparent decrease in irritability, but I knew there was nothing I could do about it. Until it was time to go to college, I lived with my grandparents. My mom wasn't involved with me even then, so I had to rely on friends to help me get settled in my dorm. Because my grandparents weren't old enough or healthy enough, my mom and Robert declined, preferring to preserve money for the twins' future. So I had to take out a student loan, and one of my relatives co-signed for it. Fortunately, one of my uncles agreed to assist, on the condition that he would never be responsible for any of the costs. I worked while I was in college to make sure I wouldn't fall behind on my payments and to give myself a financial advantage. My mother and I hardly spoke once I started college, and only my grandparents were present when I graduated. Not even my mother bothered to congratulate me. In order to avoid being a burden to my elderly grandparents, I began working and living independently after college. Although I didn't make much money during the first few years, I was still able to pay for groceries, utilities, and rent. I even started paying off my debt while setting money aside for the future. In fact, I would describe that as living on a limited income. Fortunately, things finally got better. It took a while, but I eventually rose through the ranks of my organization. Considering that I received very little assistance, I'm proud of how far I've come. I am now in a rather comfortable position. Unexpectedly, my mother discovered that I earn a good living, even though we haven't spoken in years. At nearly 33, I currently hold a senior management role at the same organization where I began my career. About 4 months ago, I received a major promotion, but I wanted to keep it a secret, so only a select few knew about it. To thank my uncle for co-signing my loan when I struggled to pay for college, I informed him of my promotion. From what I understand, he recently met my mom and Robert at a family gathering and encouraged her to reach out to congratulate me. Even though I'm sure he meant well, it didn't work out. She never contacted me. In the end, my mother still found out and recently visited my home with Robert, insisting on speaking to me. I should note that I haven't spoken to her since I started college. I blocked her everywhere and cut her out of my life after graduating, as I saw no point in hoping she would change. She didn't seem affected by my absence, and to be honest, I doubt she even noticed. Only my grandparents kept in contact with me, knowing I disliked discussing my mother, so they avoided the subject. I also hadn't stayed in touch with my uncle, so I was unaware that my mom and Robert had been struggling financially for years. I only learned about it when they showed up at my door and told me how bad things had gotten. I hoped, naively, that they had come to make amends, which is the only reason I let them inside. They began by mentioning they had heard about my promotion from my uncle and were surprised I had kept it from them. Rather than congratulating me on my success, they seemed more shocked that I hadn't shared the news. Ironically, I was taken aback that they expected me to communicate with them at all, much less share anything positive. They then expressed disappointment that I had shut them out, insisting that they had only prioritized their children over me and that I should have been old enough to understand. According to them, I should have accepted their decision instead of going to live with my grandparents. I'm not even sure why they thought I would agree with being thrown out of my home. They even tried to gaslight me, making it seem like I was the bad guy for resenting them after they discarded me to focus on their real children. That was how they started our reunion after all these years, by justifying their actions and painting me as unreasonable. They then explained that they had started a business that failed, leading to financial losses. Now, they were struggling to recover, and with the twins approaching college age, they desperately needed money. That's when I realized the real reason for their visit: they wanted financial assistance. They wasted no time getting to the point, trying to soften their request by saying I could make it up to them by paying for my siblings' education. At first, they acted upset that I hadn't contacted them despite my success, but their true motive became clear. I was astounded by their audacity in making it seem as though they were doing me a favor by allowing me to fund the education of 2 people I barely knew. I immediately told them I would not be doing that and that it was beyond disrespectful for them to assume they could coerce me into it. I reminded them that they were the reason I had to work during college and pay for my own education, because they wanted to save money for their real children, who they believed deserved it more. They had refused to support me back then, so they had no right to expect anything from me now, especially financial help. I had never interfered with their choice to prioritize the twins and had simply left them alone. They, in turn, no longer had any right to demand that I communicate with them. Instead of trying to emotionally manipulate me, I told them they should now use the same money they had once saved for the twins to actually pay for their college. At that point, I had nothing else to say, so I asked them to leave. I realized I had been foolish to let them into my house, assuming they might have come to apologize. They grew irritated and attempted to shift the blame. When I insisted they leave, they accused me of not being innocent in this situation either. They claimed that while we had all lived together, I had been overenthusiastic, overinvolved, and frequently irritable. I was baffled. I had only been a teenager trying to hold on to my family as they distanced themselves from me. I couldn't believe that was their actual issue with me. Then, they had the audacity to say that I was no better than them for refusing their request. They accused me of forgetting all the years my mother had raised me alone and insisted that this was my opportunity to make it up to her and my sister. I was accused of being rude and unappreciative. But I was just a child at the time. What choice did I have? Even if I had wanted to, I couldn't have decided not to rely on them. And it wasn't as though they had truly helped me. They pushed me out of the house as soon as they felt I was old enough to fend for myself. For the past 18 years, they refused to acknowledge my existence. Now, after all that time, they had the audacity to expect me to support them financially, as if I owed them something. The argument turned personal and ugly. Eventually, I threatened to call the police if they didn't leave my property. My mother kept bringing up the sacrifices she had made when I was younger, insisting she had done her best to be a good mother. But after more back and forth, she accused me of being ungrateful, the one time she expected me to put someone else's needs before my own. She even had the nerve to claim that I was making her out to be the villain when, in reality, it had always been the other way around. Since then, I've been struggling with this. I know I'm right, but a part of me keeps wondering, am I being too harsh? Have I been expecting too much from my mother? Or is she just trying to manipulate me again? I decided to post on Reddit to get an unbiased perspective, AITA for refusing to pay for my half-siblings' college tuition just because my mother and stepfather are struggling financially. Even though my uncle had good intentions, I had to tell him what he did was wrong. His actions put me in this situation. If he hadn't shared details of my life with my mother, or given her my contact information without my consent, none of this would have happened. He apologized profusely. He admitted he had no idea my mother would react this way or that she was having financial troubles. He acknowledged that he had no right to interfere and that if I had wanted to reconnect with my mother, I would have done so on my own. His heart was in the right place, so I don't plan to cut him out of my life. If his intentions had been different, I would be furious, but he simply made a mistake. And the truth is, I wouldn't have made it through college without him. He was the only one willing to co-sign my loan when I needed help. Without him, I might not even be in the position I am today. I made sure to let him know that what he did wasn't okay. I needed to set that boundary. But I also don't want to seem ungrateful. I think I found the right balance. We're on good terms, and I won't hold this against him. I also spoke to my grandparents about my mother's situation. They agreed that I was in the right and promised to talk to her. I understand why they've stayed in touch with her. They don't want to lose their relationship with their other grandchildren. They sympathize with her struggles, but they don't believe it's fair to put me through this. That's their stance, and I think it's reasonable. First update. Ever since we last spoke, about 9 days ago, my mother has taken it upon herself to remind me of all she supposedly did for me growing up. She sends me an email every other day, trying to guilt-trip me into believing I owe her something. But raising me wasn't a favor. It was her legal responsibility. And even then, she only cared for me when it was convenient for her. She and her husband kicked me out as soon as I became an inconvenience, justifying it by saying they needed to save money for the twins' future. Well, now we're in that future. The twins are adults. If they need help, that's on them. Instead of wasting time trying to manipulate me, my mother should focus on solving her own problems. I had been ignoring her emails, but a few days ago, I finally decided to respond. I laid everything out for her, just as I have here. As expected, she didn't take it well. She called me ungrateful again. I told her that name-calling wouldn't change the truth. I also made it clear that I no longer wanted any contact with her because she had been a terrible mother. Then, I blocked her email. She made a new one just to keep harassing me. So I blocked that one, too. And I'll keep doing it until she realizes that I am not here to be manipulated or guilt-tripped. Second update. To be honest, I'm relieved we finally had this conversation. It means this will be over soon. And I'll get the closure I need. The only reason I let my mother and stepfather into my home that day was because a small part of me still hoped that maybe they had changed. That maybe they had come to congratulate me. That maybe they wanted to make amends. But after speaking to them, I finally see them for what they are, people who cannot experience regret, guilt, or shame. They are self-centered and manipulative. I have completely given up on ever reconciling with them. And honestly, I feel lighter for it. I believe my mother showing up at my workplace today was the most bizarre thing she's ever done. Fortunately, I wasn't working, so she left quickly without accomplishing whatever she intended. I had taken the day off because I wasn't feeling well, and I'm so relieved I did. If I had been there, she likely would have caused a scene just to embarrass me. When the receptionist called to inform me that my mother had arrived and was refusing to leave, I was immediately on edge. They put her on the phone with me, and I firmly told her I was at home. Even though I was already feeling anxious about what she might do, I made it clear that if she caused any trouble at my workplace, I would take legal action against her. I even warned that I would sue her into oblivion, so much so that she wouldn't even be able to afford to send her kids to college. I did my best to sound intimidating, and I think it actually worked. She agreed to leave under the condition that I met with her in person. I reminded her that she was in no position to make demands and that she couldn't afford a lawsuit right now. I also pointed out that my employer wouldn't hesitate to take legal action if the situation escalated, and unlike me, they wouldn't be as forgiving. Her best option was to walk away quietly. After I handed the phone back to the receptionist, I received no further calls or updates about her lingering around. I assumed she finally left. However, this was way too close for comfort. I've decided to consult with a lawyer about what legal steps I can take. Since she hasn't directly threatened me, I'm unsure whether I have enough grounds for a restraining order, but I still want to explore my options. For now, I just have to hope this experience was unpleasant enough to make her leave me alone. Update 3. At this point, I'm certain we now have grounds for a restraining order. I don't even have to second-guess it anymore. Last week, when my mother showed up at my workplace, I managed to get her to leave. But after what happened this week, I know for sure that I need legal protection. A few days ago, when I got home from work, she was waiting for me outside my front door. The moment I saw her, I made it clear that I wasn't interested in arguing and that I would call the police if she didn't leave. That's when she snapped. She charged at me, knocking me to the ground and sending my phone flying just as I was about to dial for help. As I scrambled to react, she screamed at me, cursing and blaming me for everything wrong in her life. Then, she tried to physically attack me. At first, I was so shocked by her behavior that I froze. But since I work out regularly and I'm much younger than her, I was able to fight her off easily. Thankfully, all the commotion alerted my neighbors, who not only called the police but also stepped in to restrain her while we waited for them to arrive. When the police finally showed up, I made the decision to press charges. She's now in serious trouble, and I've already spoken with my attorney to file for a restraining order. I also found out that Robert took the kids and moved in with his parents. I have no idea if he plans to return, but apparently, after bailing my mother out, he confronted her about her behavior. That didn't go well. She got into a fight with him too, which only proves she's completely lost it. I honestly believe she just can't stand the fact that I'm doing well in life. But at the end of the day, she's responsible for her own problems, and I refuse to feel sorry for her. The restraining order will be in place soon, and since I've been earning more money, I've already started looking into moving to a bigger home. Now seems like the perfect time for a fresh start. My grandparents, who have been trying to remain neutral, have also had enough of her. She's been treating them horribly, and they've told me they no longer want to be around her. At this point, the only person she can blame for everyone abandoning her is herself. Honestly, I'm done worrying about her.